Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Of course, it does help if you put the camera on before you start talking. Next question comes from View You. This is in response to the Death of the Kronos video. And View writes, I can't believe that right now, this is the first I've heard that Kronos has been discontinued. They are most assertedly have to present a replacement, but not the Nautilus. Therefore, there are more professionals out there that solely depend on the Kronos as their main and only AX. I don't know, for instance, if Jordan Rudess is using Kronos still. Well, I can tell you Jordan Rudess is using Kronos and he has a Nautilus. But he still uses, I don't know whether the Nautilus is on stage because I don't know what his rig is at the moment, but last time I saw Jordan Rudess in concert, he still had a Kronos fully embedded in his rig. So yes, he has covered himself in answer to that particular question. If they come out with something better, then that's okay. If they weasel out and make everyone get a Nautilus instead now, hell no. Because you don't stop making the best workstation of our lifetime as we know it, unless there is something better out there to replace it with. In the meantime, I have to hope mine holds out. Unless I bought the first run of the Kronos. So better than 10 years old, it's got to hold up. All my work is through it. Well, View. In short, there was no announcement from Korg that this was going to happen. However, the Kronos slowly started to disappear from Korg websites as an active product. And then various selling portals, etc. Then just after Christmas, a number of leading keyboard players affiliated with Korg started appearing on the Korg channel, demonstrating and pushing Nautilus. I think, as many others do, that the OS for the Kronos was probably got to the point where it needed to be rewritten and updated. After all, it was developed for the Oasis in 2005 and although has been updated for the Kronos and essentially updated for the Nautilus, it's the same OS and it's the same engines. But with the competition using a whole plug-in, plug-out concept and different approaches to sequencing, while I still believe my Kronos will still stand up against the competition sonically, it's starting to lack the features being deployed to some of these other platforms. I think the other factor why Korg is being really tight-lipped about the next flagship is a shortage of components. Now, this was written over a year ago. Well, it was written 9 months ago, should I say. And the components side of it is starting to become better. But at the point in time of writing this, Behringer had been really open about the fact that they cannot go to manufacture with many of the products they've announced as teaser videos, etc., because they can't get the parts to maintain the supply or even the initial production run. Ronan's new Juno X is still on pre-order at the point of writing this, despite the launch videos nearly 2 months ago prior to this point. If I remember correctly, there was not a gap between the Korg workstation since in the past. In fact, In many cases, the new synth was launched before the old one was discontinued. Now, I don't know whether anyone can cast their mind back. Do you remember the M1? The M1 saw out the T-Series. This machine here is the T-Series, and it went out of production before the M1 went out of production. But I think that was a specific point in time. The T-Series was, of course, replaced by the O1W that arrived on the scene, and was still, the M1 was still in production then. The Oasis was discontinued because it was just too damn expensive. And there was actually a 2 to 3 year gap between the Oasis and the Kronos. But as you can see, part of why they when you look at the build quality of the Oasis over the Kronos, and don't get me wrong, I really love my Kronos, but I just wish the Oasis keyboard and controls and screen that were built into the Oasis were actually transferred to the Kronos, just updated. So I love the tilt screen on the Oasis. That makes it far easy to read, but it's only a mono colour screen, if you like. It's like a blue colour. And I love the LEDs by the sliders, but all those things were removed from Kronos because they would just seem to be too expensive. My guess is possibly NAMM 2023 there may be, and NAMM has been moved back this year, so it's not, we didn't have winter NAMM in January, it's kind of a little bit later on in the year. Korg may drop a new instrument, but they're still being very tight-lipped, and you know, at the point of writing this, you know, the supply chain was still uncertain. We know the supply chain has improved, but it's still uncertain. View then writes back and says, as outdated as one might think the Kronos is compared to the competition, Roland and Yamaha, etc., for my money, I'd still buy another Kronos if I had to. I'm looking to see if I can get a used backup Kronos just in case. As far as any thought that there is another workstation on the horizon to replace Kronos, I hope they don't shortchange anyone with lesser components. I suppose, being that every major electronic component is being manufactured in China, it's no wonder. It didn't have to be that way. America sold out. So did Japan. And funny enough, so did Europe. Everything is more expensive and cheaper in more ways than one. China can't even build a simple floor fan to keep my music room cool when the ACs are not on. 2 different fans made in China, fried. Never happened before to me. Their stuff just doesn't last. Get my tongue around that. I'm thankful that my Kronos has lasted and no major issues. The joystick seems a little bit worn, but enough to merit me fixing it. The keys are responsive as always. The only thing about it is that I purchased libraries on the Korg site. Sound Iron is one of them. I tried loading them into the Kronos as per instructions I read somewhere and botched it. Some of it loaded, but some of it's not functional. I won't play what seemed to be installed. I don't know how to uninstall it and reinstall it. Thanks anyway for responding. Here's to hope. I will put a link to this particular guy, but if you're a Kronos user, Mr. Kronos is a guy called Francis Capistrano. He's an Australian chap, and pretty much what he doesn't know about the Kronos platform is not worth knowing. And he does a series of YouTube videos, and I'll put a link to his channel below. But he's the man to follow for Kronos queries and questions. He's created lots of videos about this stuff. And I agree, even after 11 years of the Kronos still holds its own against these new Phantoms and montages that are coming out. But I've said several times that with version 2 of the OS for the Phantom, that this workstation is now a serious contender, depending on what you want to do with it. Did you see this week that the US passed a CHIPS? Now this is going back, actually the US has now passed this CHIPS Act, as it was realised that it is now beholden completely to the Far East for the supply of this stuff. If the Far East semiconductor manufacturing industry gets a cold, the world gets a cold. Western governments should have stopped businesses being transferred to the Far East, transferring these capabilities. But they were all in search of profit. And this is a big problem. So, companies have a social and a moral obligation not only to make profit. And unfortunately, during the 80s, 90s and probably early 2000s, the social and moral obligations of these companies went completely out the window because their bosses were chasing bonuses. And therefore, they were chasing profit to make their bonuses and their incentive plans stack up. Governments have a responsibility to force component manufacturers to manufacture components in territories other than Taiwan and China, because we're now becoming too reliant on these areas within the world, and it's something that became overtly apparent that this became an issue during the pandemic when these places all shut down and we couldn't move components from these locations to other locations. If you had a semiconductor industry in the US, you probably would have been able to continue. Prices might have gone up, but you probably would have been able to continue. But what the other thing you've done by allowing China and to take over this area is, guys, you've given all your IP to the competitor. You complete idiots. And that's all I'm going to say on that.